They erased me from my brother's wedding after secretly taking the $50,000 zero cents I gave to fund it. I was the family ghost, the artsy disappointment no one took seriously. What they didn't know. If this story pulled at something deep inside you, if you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or erased by the people who should seen your worth, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe, hit like, and join me as we uncover the power of quiet resilience and the legacy it builds. The building still smelled like sawdust and second chances. It was a crumbling old office suite tucked behind a forgotten row of antique shops in Savannah. Faded brick walls, squeaky floorboards, sunlight that filtered through slatted blinds like secrets trying to slip through. Most people saw a condemned structure. Camille Rivers saw legacy. She always had. She stood in the middle of the gutted space, wearing ripped jeans, work boots, and a linen shirt streaked with pencil sketches and plaster dust. Her curls were pinned up, her hands were coated in chalk, and her mind was racing through floor plans. She was redesigning this space as a surprise, a timeless showroom meant to celebrate the wedding of her younger brother, Nathan. Something elegant, something real. That was the thing about Camille. Even after a lifetime of being overlooked by her family, she still wanted to give. She still hoped, stupidly, that one day they might see her. The ringtone broke through the hum of the ceiling fan overhead. White Magnolia Weddings, read the caller ID. Camille wiped her hands on a cloth and answered with her usual warmth. Camille speaking. The voice on the other end was tight, corporate. Miss Rivers, this is Haley from White Magnolia. I'm calling regarding the Rivers Donovan wedding scheduled for next month. Camille smiled. Of course. How can I help? There was a pause. Then, I'm so sorry, but we were contacted yesterday by Claire Donovan and the Rivers family. They've requested that you be removed from the guest list. Camille blinked. I'm sorry, what? They said there was family tension, that your presence might cause unnecessary complications. I'm only the messenger, Miss Rivers. Her heart dropped into her stomach, but her voice stayed steady. And the deposit? Another pause. They've requested to retain the full $50,000. 0 cents you paid. They said it's already been allocated across vendors. Camille stared at the light streaming through the dusty windows. A minute ago, she was designing a custom archway Nathan would have walked through on his wedding day. Now she was being erased from the event, from the family narrative. She didn't speak. Not yet. We understand this is difficult, Haley offered, but the client was very clear. Camille hung up without another word. 15 minutes later, the bell above the old office door rang, hard and shrill. Camille turned around, startled. It was her mother. Laureen Rivers never showed up unannounced. She arrived like storms, unpredictable and sweeping. Mom? Her mother's eyes scanned the half-renovated space with disgust. So this is where you've been hiding. Camille tried to manage a smile. It's the old Carmichael property. I'm restoring it. It's going to be a showroom. Thought it'd be a nice... I just came from Claire's dress fitting, Lorraine interrupted sharply. She's mortified. Her family is hosting senators and socialites, and you, walking around in dust-covered boots with your... whatever this is. We can't have you at the wedding. Camille's throat burned. So you told the planner to uninvite me. Lorraine crossed her arms. Don't make this dramatic. You've always chosen your little side projects over family. This is Nathan's big moment. It's not about you. I wasn't trying to make it about me, Camille said, jaw clenched. I just wanted to contribute. You already did, her mother snapped. The deposit was generous, but let's not ruin things by showing up and making people uncomfortable. There was a silence so thick it made the walls feel closer. Then, with sudden fury, Lorraine's hand shot out, knocking over the antique floor lamp Camille had just sourced from New Orleans and crash, splintering glass across the hardwood floor. Grow up, Camille, she hissed. You're an embarrassment. The door slammed behind her. Camille stood frozen. Glass crunched beneath her boots as she walked toward the broken lamp. It had taken her 3 weeks to find it. She picked up one jagged piece, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but something far deeper. She looked around. This building was where it had all begun, where she'd drawn her first blueprint, where she learned that her eye for restoration could turn forgotten spaces into masterpieces. While her family hosted Sunday brunches and praised Nathan's corporate ascent, Camille had worked 14-hour days, turning ruins into beauty, and now they wanted her gone. She reached for her phone, pulled up the internal message system for Rivers Revival Group, typed without hesitation, effective immediately, cancel all vendor contracts affiliated with the Rivers Donovan wedding. Withdraw staff, services, locations. Do not reassign unless instructed directly by me. See River CEO. She hit send. Then she sat down on the dusty bench by the window, surrounded by tools and broken glass. For the first time in years, she didn't cry. She just stared out at the street, watching the world pass by, a world her family still thought she had no power to touch, but they were about to learn otherwise, very soon. The day after my mother shattered the lamp, and whatever fragile thread of respect she had left for me. I didn't go into the office. I went home, pulled the blackout curtains closed, and sat on the hardwood floor of my loft, staring at the city skyline I'd helped redesign from the inside out. The truth was, they didn't just uninvite me from a wedding, they erased me. I was the oldest child, the one who used to read Nathan bedtime stories, help him with school projects, sneak him food when he was grounded. But somewhere between high school and adulthood, I became the other Rivers child, the difficult one, the one who didn't finish architecture school, the one who didn't attend family vacations, the one who moved too far away. I hadn't moved away. I'd moved forward. 8 years ago, I dropped out of Savannah Institute of Design, not because I lacked the talent, but because I saw something no one else in my family could see. Abandoned properties with soul, historic buildings with cracked facades and rotting staircases that no one cared about anymore. They weren't ugly to me. They were sleeping giants. So while my brother climbed the legal ladder, impressing the family with internships and honor cords, I was scraping together loans, learning how to file zoning permits, and hand-scrubbing tile grout at 2 a.m. with nothing but YouTube tutorials and faith. But no one ever asked me about it. At Thanksgiving dinners, they'd ask if I was still doing that house flipping thing. I'd nod, smile, say, yeah, it's going well, and they'd pivot back to Nathan's summer at a DC law firm or Claire's new brand partnership with some organic skincare line when I bought my 5th building, a historic brick hotel on the waterfront. I emailed my parents a photo. Mom responded with, "That's nice, Camille. You should be careful with your spending, though." I didn't reply. They didn't know I'd just signed a $1,200,000 0 cents contract with a wedding brand that wanted the entire place for summer events. They didn't know that my bank account had more zeros than Nathan's ever would. And honestly, that was fine. Until now. Because now they'd crossed a line. They hadn't just ignored me. They used me, took my money, insulted me, and acted like I should be grateful to be left out. The phone buzzed beside me. It was Daria, my operations manager. Hey, just confirming the directive from yesterday. We've pulled out of all Rivers Donovan contracts. White Magnolia is scrambling. Looks like they didn't realize who you are. I exhaled. Good. Keep it that way. For now. Camille, I'm not trying to push, but you sure you want to do this? I stood up and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. I don't want revenge, I said quietly. I want accountability. Click. Later that afternoon, I returned to the office. Not the old one my mother smashed through, but the main HQ of Rivers Revival Group. The front lobby was sleek, with reclaimed wood walls and a chandelier I designed myself. People didn't associate it with me because the CEO's name wasn't splashed across the door. I'd built it that way. Quiet power. My assistant handed me a stack of messages. You've had 6 calls from Nathan, 3 from your mother, and a voicemail from Claire. I nodded. Any press inquiries? 1. A local wedding magazine heard something about White Magnolia losing a high-profile client last minute. Tell them no comment yet. Inside my office, I sat behind my custom walnut desk and opened my laptop. Vendor cancellations were already being processed. Refunds were issued to guests who booked hotel rooms at one of our properties. Catering was suspended. Decor rentals were withdrawn. I wasn't leaving a mess. I was removing a foundation they thought they could walk all over. And then, at 6:13 p.m., my phone rang again. Nathan Rivers. I stared at the screen for a moment, then answered. Camille, what the hell is going on? Hi, little brother. Having a rough day? Everything is falling apart, he said, breathless. The venue, the flowers, the rehearsal dinner. Claire is freaking out. Vendors keep telling us everything's canceled. Did you do this? You mean after being uninvited from your wedding? After my own mother threw a tantrum and smashed my workspace? After you all decided my money was good enough, but my presence wasn't? There was silence. I didn't know the deposit was from you, he finally said. Mom said Claire's family helped with that. No. Claire's family ghosted when the estimates came in. Mom called me crying about how expensive it was. I didn't ask questions. I wrote a check that same night. Camille, I didn't know. No, you didn't ask. He exhaled like a man who just realized the ground beneath him wasn't concrete. It was glass. I thought you were just still doing the design thing. I laughed, not out of humor, out of something colder. I'm not doing the design thing, Nathan. I own 14 wedding venues across 3 states. I manage 6 boutique hotels. I just signed a partnership deal with Lux Events for nationwide expansion. Another long silence. But you never told us. I did, you just never listened. Click. I hung up. And for the first time in 8 years, it felt like I was finally being heard. 2 days later, the wedding collapse had gone from whispers to wildfire. Vendors across Savannah were scrambling. White Magnolia couldn't find A's replacement venue. Prestige Catering lost access to their top-tier supplier. Claire's planner tried to book a last-minute resort, only to discover, politely but firmly, that their booking privileges had been revoked. All of them ran through one parent company, mine. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I also wasn't going to keep letting them walk across my name like a doormat with a smile stitched into it. By Friday morning, I was at Hollow Garden House, one of the smallest venues I owned. Quiet, elegant, nestled in a grove of magnolia trees and thick with southern humidity. It had a rustic reception hall with capacity for maybe 80 people if everyone skipped dessert. I stood in the center of the hall, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, and said aloud to no one, "This'll do." I picked up my phone and called Daria. "Tell them we have one space available," I said. "Hollow garden, basic catering, basic floral, staff photographer, reception capped at 80 guests. No substitutions." Daria whistled on the other end. "That's brutal." "It's fair." "And the price?" I smiled. 200,000, paid in full, non-refundable. "That's 4 times the original price." "No," I said calmly. "That's the price of disrespect and of learning." Daria paused. "Camille, you sure you want to make it this public?" I looked around the space. The exposed beams I restored myself, the scuffs on the floor from 100 past celebrations. So many families had walked through this place, stronger than when they arrived. Maybe it was time mine did too. "Yeah," I said, "I'm sure." That afternoon, Claire called me directly. The first words out of her mouth weren't hello. They were, "You're ruining our wedding." I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I said, "You mean the wedding I paid for? You didn't tell anyone it was from you." "Because I didn't need credit. I just wanted Nathan to have what he dreamed of." She scoffed. "You're acting like a villain now." "No, I'm acting like someone who finally got tired of being disposable." Claire's voice softened. "Barely. I didn't know about your company, about any of it. That seems to be a common theme. We were told you weren't stable, that you floated between jobs, that you had trouble finishing things." "I didn't finish things?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Check the Georgia Business Registry. Rivers Revival Group has a portfolio worth over $90 million, 0 cents, and every square inch of it I finished with my own hands." There was a pause. "I see," Claire whispered. "Look, what would it take to fix this?" I leaned against the polished table in the middle of the venue. 3 things. "I'm listening." 1. A formal apology, not just a "we're sorry you're upset" statement. A real acknowledgement from Nathan and your families that I was misjudged. Claire inhaled. "Okay." 2. My invitation reinstated. Not out of pity, not as a favor. I want to be there because you actually want me there, right? And 3, you pay full market rate. No discounts, no family favors. You want a wedding? You pay for it like every other client. She hesitated. 200 grand for Hollow Garden? That's the only option. What if we don't accept? Then you get married at City Hall or wherever you can book in 3 weeks without my vendors. And good luck with that. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Nathan called again. "Camille, are you really making us pay to fix this?" "I already paid, Nathan. In time, in silence, in being erased. Now it's your turn to invest something." He was quiet. "I'll talk to Claire and our parents." "You do that." As I set the phone down, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not revenge, relief. Not because I'd pulled the thread, but because I was no longer pretending it wasn't wrapped around my throat. The apology didn't come with flowers. It came with an email. Subject: Camiel, we'd like to talk. It was signed by Nathan, but the body was clearly written by my mother, punctuated, formal, careful with phrasing the way only someone trained in Southern politeness could be when they were actually begging beneath every word. We understand there may have been misjudgments, emotions, miscommunication. We'd be open to resolving this before the wedding. Please let us know your availability. No, we're sorry. No, you were right. Just let's resolve this. I didn't respond. Instead, I had Amanda, my private events coordinator, schedule a meeting for Saturday at noon. Not at Hollow Garden, not at any neutral location, at the Gilded Lily, a private dining hall tucked inside the top floor of the Hartley, a restored 19th century mansion overlooking the river. I had bought the Hartley 3 years ago. Quietly, it had been dying, leaking ceilings, termites in the walls, long abandoned by its former luxury. I rebuilt every inch of it, like I had done with myself. When they arrived, I was already seated at the head of the long mahogany table, sunlight spilling across the marble floor, soft jazz playing in the background. Mom walked in first. Her heels clicked like judgment. Nathan followed, looking like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. And behind them, Claire. Awkward, but trying to smile, they paused at the threshold. You own this place? Mom asked, barely above a whisper. I stood slowly. You've eaten here, haven't you? She nodded. On our anniversary last year. I smiled thinly. I hope the duck was good. The recipe's mine. They sat. No one spoke. Finally, my father, who arrived late, slightly out of breath, cleared his throat. Camille, we owe you an apology. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. He looked to Mom. She looked to Nathan. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Then Nathan took a breath. Camille, I'm sorry. I didn't move. I'm sorry for making assumptions, for not asking questions, for being too wrapped up in my own path to see yours. You deserved better. From all of us. I nodded slowly, waiting. Claire leaned forward. I should have spoken up. When they took your name off the guest list, I knew it felt wrong. I stayed quiet because I didn't want drama. But that silence, it cost us more than we realized. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye. She looked around the room again, at the chandeliers, the velvet chairs, the gold-rimmed plates. You did all this, she whispered. Did? I replied. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. I thought you were lost. I wasn't lost, I said, voice steady. I was just building something you didn't want to understand. Why didn't you tell us? I did. You just didn't believe it mattered unless it came with a title, or a degree, or a LinkedIn profile. My father exhaled sharply, leaning back. We underestimated you. No, I corrected. You erased me. And when you needed something, money, support, resources, I was good enough. But when it came to standing beside you at the altar, suddenly I was an embarrassment. No one argued, and that silence was the most honest moment we'd shared in a decade. Finally, Mom spoke. Camille, we'd be honored if you'd attend the wedding. Not as a guest, but as family. I stared at her. Because I'm useful? Or because you mean it? She closed her eyes. Because we mean it. Nathan reached into his jacket and slid a folded letter across the table. Handwritten, my name in careful cursive. It's an apology. From all of us. I wanted you to have it in writing. I looked down at the paper, and something in me, tight and bitter for so long, unclenched just enough to breathe. "Well," I said, leaning back, "you've got 3 weeks. Let's make this wedding happen. But this time, I'm not the silent sponsor." I'm walking in through the front door. Claire smiled, small and genuine. We wouldn't have it any other way. And for the first time in years, I believed her. The morning of the wedding arrived, wrapped in mist and quiet. Camille stood just beyond the stone archway of Hollow Garden House, watching as florists adjusted arrangements, servers straightened white linen, and the string quartet rehearsed in hushed harmony. The venue, though smaller than the original estate Nathan and Claire had dreamed of, was glowing. It wasn't grand, but it was intimate, intentional, and dripping in soft elegance. She had designed every inch not for revenge, but to remind them beauty doesn't come from size, it comes from soul. Inside the bridal suite, Claire looked in the mirror. Her makeup was done, her veil perfectly pinned, but her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her earrings. "You okay?" Camille asked gently from the doorway. Claire turned, surprised. "Yeah, I didn't think you'd come back after everything." "I didn't think I would either," Camille admitted. Claire crossed the room and took her hand. "I meant what I said. I want you here. Not because of the venue or the food or anything your company provided, but because I want Nathan to have his sister by his side." Camille smiled, tight but real. "Then let's give him that." The ceremony was simple. Rows of white chairs beneath an oak canopy, Claire and Nathan framed by magnolia blooms and lanterns that flickered like fireflies. Camille sat in the second row, between her parents, who were unusually silent. Her mother reached over, gently touched her hand during the vows, and for the first time in years, Camille didn't pull away. At the reception, as guests sipped champagne and murmured about how elegant the wedding turned out despite the downsizing, Camille wandered toward the balcony. She needed a moment. From up there, she could see it all. Every table perfectly set, every guest laughing, every flower exactly where it needed to be. Her staff had executed everything flawlessly. She had rebuilt this day from rubble. "Hey," Nathan's voice came from behind her. Camille didn't turn, thought you'd be busy taking photos. I snuck out, needed air. He joined her at the railing. I've never seen Claire cry the way she did when she saw the setup this morning, he said. She said it was better than her original dream. Camille gave a short laugh. Funny how something built with respect turns out better than something built on silence. Nathan winced. I deserve that. He turned toward her fully. I know I said it before, but I need to say it again. You made this happen. And I don't just mean the venue or the food or the flowers. I mean this family. You held us together even when we pretended you weren't there. And that's unforgivable. She looked at him. And yet, here we are. I was wrong about you, Camille. I thought success meant a degree, a job title, a LinkedIn profile like you said. I thought you were drifting. Camille raised an eyebrow. I was building, he nodded. And you built something bigger than any of us can measure. There was a beat of silence. Which is why, Nathan continued, pulling something from his jacket pocket, I was hoping you'd read this tonight. He handed her a folded piece of paper. My best man's speech, he said. I want you to read it. Camille blinked. Me? Nathan nodded. You earned the spot. She opened the paper. Her hands shook just a little. It was handwritten, messy, heartfelt, unpolished. in the best way, and at the very top it read, "To the person who made this day possible, not just with money, but with forgiveness." Camille swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'll read it," she said softly, "but I might cry." "Good," Nathan smiled. "You always were the brave one." And for the first time, standing on that balcony wrapped in twinkle lights and the scent of garden roses, Camille believed him. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly, casting a golden hue across the reception hall. Glasses clinked, forks scraped porcelain, and laughter rippled through the crowd like wind across water. The DJ lowered the music. All eyes turned to the head table. Camille stood, holding the microphone Nathan had just handed her. Her palms were damp, not from fear, but from the weight of 8 years she was about to unload. She looked out at the guests. Strangers, family, influencers, college friends, people who had only ever known pieces of her story. Tonight they would hear the whole of it. She cleared her throat, took a breath, and began. "Hi, I'm Camille Rivers, sister of the groom, self-appointed best man, and apparently the woman behind the curtain." Laughter, light, tentative, the kind that said, "This might get real." Nathan and I didn't grow up close. We were 6 years apart. I was the big sister who colored outside the lines. He was the golden boy who never smudged the page. As we got older, I chose a path no one in our family quite understood. I dropped out of school. I got dirty. I restored crumbling buildings, while people whispered that I'd wasted my potential. Camille glanced at her parents. Her father stared down at his folded hands. Her mother looked at her like she was seeing her for the first time. But here's what no one realized. While everyone was looking the other way, I was building something. Brick by brick, contract by contract, mistake by mistake, I poured everything into creating spaces that made people feel safe, celebrated, seen. She paused, letting that land. When I gave $50,000, 0 cents, to help with this wedding, I didn't want recognition. I just wanted my brother to have joy. And when I got the call saying I was uninvited because my presence might ruin the image, something inside me snapped, not out of ego, out of exhaustion. The room was still. You could have heard a wine glass settle. So I pulled back everything, the venues, the vendors, the support. I let my absence be felt. And somehow, that silence made more noise than I ever could have by speaking. She turned slightly, facing Nathan and Claire, but then something else happened. You called. You showed up, not just with panic, but with apology, with real words, with real eyes. And for the first time, I was seen, not as a failure, but as a sister. Claire wiped a tear. Nathan didn't blink, like doing so might make the moment vanish. This space, this day, this joy, it's not mine. It's yours. But I want you to remember something, both of you. Legacy isn't what we build for show. It's what we build when no one claps. And family? Family is not the people who praise us when we win. It's the people who apologize when they realize they were wrong. She raised her glass. To Nathan and Claire, may your marriage be rooted in truth, grown in grace, and lit with the kind of honesty it takes to rebuild even the most broken foundation. And to every guest in this room, never underestimate the quiet one in the corner. She might be building your future. A beat, then applause, real, raw, rippled with regret and respect. As Camille sat back down, Nathan wrapped his arms around her, tight, honest, No more masks. Her father stood slowly and extended his hand. She took it. He whispered, "You didn't just build a company, Camille. You rebuilt this family." Later that night, as guests danced and lanterns floated into the Georgia sky, Camille slipped away to the back patio, barefoot, heels in hand. She looked up at the stars and unexhaled. 8 years, 100 unreturned calls, dozens of family dinners where no one asked about her life. And still, she had loved them, not because they earned it, but because she had built herself strong enough to keep loving, even when they couldn't see her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. "You were never invisible. We just weren't looking. Thank you for not giving up on us." She smiled. Maybe this was how healing began. Not with fanfare, but with someone finally saying your name and meaning it in the end. It wasn't about the money, the venues, or the power I held. It was about being seen, not for what I owned, but for who I truly was. I spent years building quietly, hoping love would find me through the noise. And when it finally did, it came not through praise, but through honest apology. My story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming identity, setting boundaries, and reminding others that the ones they overlook might be the ones holding everything together.